Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
In a time when shouting matches dominate public discourse, many opt for silence.
But silence, too, makes a statement.
This episode explores why we need people who are willing to be open-minded and outspoken, and how change only happens when we show up, speak up, and refuse to give away our power by default.
Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom. I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Mom.
So we have an interesting episode planned for today. We're talking about courageous participation. And I think that there are a couple of various factors of this that are worth talking through. So, you guys ready to dive in?
Ready.
Yeah, I think we should just disclose off the bat that there's plenty of opportunity to go off the rails. We're gonna try and stay on them as well as we can. Focus primarily on courageous participation as a topic, but because of what courageous participation is about, it presents a lot of opportunities for left turns.
Absolutely. Good disclaimer, Cole. So let's kick things off with the illusion of neutrality. We're talking about people who choose not to get involved because they just want to stay out of it. But history shows that silence reinforces the status quo. And so we want to unpack why not taking a stand is still very definitely taking a side. So one of the references that we pulled up to chat about here is Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham Jail from 1963. And here's a quick quote for us. "We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people." And I think that there's just something so profound that he really hits the nail on the head there. Choosing to stay silent still is picking a side.
Yeah. You've got another modern example here, but I want to see if I can contextualize it a little bit differently, because later we're going to talk about some things having to do within the education system. But let's say that I don't have children and I don't plan to have children, but it is still important for me to participate in the choices that our education system makes and the choices made around those education systems, because I have to continue to exist within a society that is being educated by these systems. And so that is why, even though I don't have children, I still should at least be concerned with some of the issues around education, because I have to continue to exist in society with the people being affected by those choices. And so
that doesn't mean that you're going to go to all the PTA meetings, though, or the school board council meetings. That's not what we're talking about.
Right. And I'm not saying that I need to go in and say, oh, this is the curriculum that you have to have. But I also think that it should be fair for me as a citizen to say, hey, you're not teaching these kids math. You probably need to teach them math.
That's important.
I guess this conversation really came up because I had a conversation with somebody that said they didn't want to, or I've had multiple conversations with people who say, I just don't want to be involved. I just don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of this. And I understand that. And I think that us doing this has probably made me much more outspoken. And I think there's a couple of things with that. I think one, we're talking about this a lot more. We're verbalizing things a lot more. I feel more educated because of some of the research that we've done. So I get that. I also recognize that it's really hard to be involved, to make your voice heard, because there's not really great channels that are easy to do that with. You know, I'm frustrated, you can write your congressman, you can write your senator, and when you just get a form letter back, or, you know, the latest one that I received, and I have to say it was better than some of the letters that I've received back, but it was also just propaganda. And I thought, I don't want your propaganda. I want to have a conversation with you. And so it's still on me to push for that conversation, but it's harder. It's hard to make your voice heard.
I think that goes back to me a little bit more to the conversation we had a couple of months ago about intimate representation, how we think representation should be more
conversational, intimate.
Yeah, conversational. I think you should be representing smaller groups of people. And I also want to say, I think there are some topics that I don't really need to get involved in. Like, it's okay for me to have an opinion, but there are some topics where you could be undecided. And so it's okay to be neutral and say, hey, I don't understand this, so I'm not going to provide my opinion because I don't know which way to feel about it. And I think in some of those cases, it would be important for you to go and educate yourself, but I don't necessarily think it would be important on every topic.
I agree.
So, Cole, I'm curious, how do you decide, hey, this is one where it's okay for me to not get involved and have a great big opinion on versus I need to do something about this? How do you decide those? Because
That's a great question.
It can't be a toss-up, Oh, today, gonna get involved about this. Ta-da!
Yeah, I mean, I think education and being informed are really important. And I think you have to decide, okay, what are the possible implications of this? And if they are wide enough that they have a potential to impact me, then I need to think through the entire process and some potential outcomes to see how me and the people around me could be affected by that. Because again, going back to that same example, I have friends that have children and I want their children to be well educated. So even if it's, hey, we're going to focus on algebra and not just completely geometry.
Okay.
We're only going to focus on algebra and we're not going to focus on geometry. Well, I mean, I think there's an argument that could be made for that in some instances. I think basic geometry is useful, but not everybody needs to know the depths of geometry. So maybe you make that an elective course. But if I have friends who have kids that they think they really need to learn geometry, then maybe it makes sense for me to make my voice heard as well as a citizen. Or if that's not really a great example, but I think it kind of illustrates the point, is you have to go in and analyze those things to say, okay, what are the ripple effects of this decision? And are those going to affect me and the people around me? Is that going to be a positive change or a negative change?
So, okay, I'm going to step a little bit further. I think that it's really going to be difficult to say I have to research and form an opinion on almost everything to decide if there's a ripple effect. But I think that there are things that we can't stand idly by on. The things that make real noise that we have to speak up for. So, just to dive right into this, that's going to be abortion. That's going to be, individual rights. That's going to be gun rights. And those are kind of things. Or that's going to be, are our representatives serving us correctly?
I'm sitting here thinking Cole's using math, Mom's using various civil rights and liberties. I'm thinking about it from like a gay marriage standpoint. I, Callie, am not gay. And it doesn't impact me at all if two men go and get married or two women go and get married. So I'm trying to kind of figure out where is that line of, hey, this doesn't impact me. You guys want to do that? Totally cool. Versus not my silence, my lack of being supportive or an ally gets in the way of that for somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I take that scenario a little bit farther, that means if you don't get involved, then
I'm not standing in the way.
You're not standing in the way, but you're also not supporting anything. So I don't know where that line is.
Well, you have to decide that for yourself on every topic.
And is that, I guess that would just be based on your personal convictions, whatever that may look like for you and mean. I am a Bible thumping, deep South, Bible Belt Christian. So the Bible says that a man shouldn't lay with a man, so I should be opposed.
You have to make that decision for yourself.
Sure.
And I think if you're well enough informed and you actually read the Bible, you would think about it a little bit harder than that.
I agree.
which isn't always the case. But I mean, from a basic perspective, yeah.
So let me flip this. If I'm a Christian and I believe that being gay is wrong, do I have an obligation, if there are other people out there who are fighting for gay rights, do I really have an obligation to step in and go, I believe this is wrong?
Oppose them.
Or can I sit back and not say anything because it doesn't affect me? It doesn't change my life.
Let's take a look at the biblical answer for that question. What does the Bible say in that circumstance?
Well, most people would tell you that the Bible says that it's an abomination.
Does the Bible command you to prevent other people from sinning?
Oh, aren't you tricky?
Theology
Get the log out of
Thursday
your
with
own eye.
Cole.
Who knew?
So again, I feel like that just cloudies the answer to, or lack thereof, to my question. When do you decide what to participate in? When do you decide? I mean, Cole, I think your point is incredibly valid. Get the log out of your own eye. So how does that work? How do you decide? I mean, because to me, that just screams, hey, Callie, you need to be educated on every single topic out there.
If you want to participate in society and you want to have an opinion on something, you need to be educated in order to do that. And if you're not
I agree.
educated, then maybe you say, okay, I'm not well enough educated to form an opinion on this. So if I think I should have an opinion, I have to go and educate myself before I can make an informed decision.
I'm thinking about the people in Germany when Hitler was coming up, and because I think that's a very token reference here, is that because they didn't speak up against him, they just let it happen. And again, because it wasn't affecting them, that they let it happen.
It's more nuanced than that, because you need to think about the state that Germany was in post-World War I, prior to World War II, that may have driven its citizens to support a movement like that.
So spell it out for us, Cole. Just a little
They
bit.
were in an economic nightmare at the time with the reparations that they were paying to France and the rest of Europe. Their inflation was astronomically high. People were taking wheelbarrows of cash to the grocery store to buy a loaf of bread. So if you are in political and economic turmoil like that, then maybe it makes sense to support a strong, unified, authoritarian leader to pull your nation out of that. Now, does that mean that the people who were supporting him may have lacked some foresight? Yeah, it's possible.
I think that just made this all the harder, because then you're saying that it's okay to support.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that because those people were in that situation and they were not educated well enough, they were not informed enough to have the foresight to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best idea, it was all the much more detrimental. I mean, World War II absolutely devastated all of Europe, Germany in particular.
Okay.
And if
bring
those citizens had been more well educated to participate in a more meaningful manner, I think it's possible that they could have avoided that.
Okay, let's bring it to something current. There is definitely conversation about we're in a constitutional crisis, that our current president and administration is pushing the boundary for not listening to the judicial branch, not utilizing the congressional branch. So is it going to be later on in a historical perspective that we look back and go, oh, there were tariffs and there were these and there was this going on. And so I understand that, they didn't stand up. And so that constitutional crisis really did occur.
Maybe I'm totally and completely off base and ignorant, and I'll accept that. History is not my strong suit. I'll be the first to say I'm working on it. I'm learning. I'm doing the research and putting all of that time in. But if you're sitting here talking about people taking wheelbarrows of cash, of actual cash, which we know to be true, to the store to buy a single loaf of bread, this is pre the internet. This is before Google. What did their textbooks look like? What did their education system look like? What was their access to information? How did that all work? And so I think I am by no means saying that Nazis were doing the right thing and all of this is good at all. But I wonder if there's a little bit of a pass there on anybody in Europe to say, hey, we didn't see the signs of this going in this direction because we were poorly educated, because access to information was so limited, because of propaganda, because of all of these different methods in which that education system is severely lacking. But then I turn that around into today's day and age. You have access to anything and everything that you want and more that you don't. And so what is our excuse? We know what this looks like. We know what the precursor is. Like, hindsight is 2020, right? So if we can sit here and look at history, we have access to so much information and so much historical data that we can say, hey, if this, then that, and watch the effects of a domino effect and watch how that all plays out. What is our excuse for playing into it?
Well, I think what's almost on the other end of the spectrum at this point, where there is so much information, where it can be really difficult to decipher all of that.
Totally.
And look, here's the thing. To be honest, nobody's right 100% of the time, ever.
No.
You can analyze something and analyze and still get it wrong.
Sure.
But at least you tried. And I think that says something.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm going to go back. There were people in Germany who were concerned, who saw red flags, and maybe the general public didn't know that. But I see a correlation here where you have people who are saying, we need to be aware of this. People that we have respected in the past who are saying, we need to be aware of this situation. We need to band together. We need to speak together. So, that's
the courageous participation part. Like, if you are participating, like if you are informing yourself about those things, that is participating.
If you are informing yourself about topics, that is courageous participation. I like that a lot. I'm still struggling to figure out when the next step is necessary.
Yeah. Where do you know?
Yeah. How do you know?
I don't think you do.
We had a conversation totally and completely unrelated, and I'll loop it back in. Give me just a second. I know, tangent, whatever. We had Theology Thursday with Cole. Now we're having Tangent Tuesday with Callie. So just give me a second.
We had Star Wars analogy before. Go with it.
We were talking the other day in my kind of friend group about giving money to homeless people. And there were some people who were staunchly opposed, and there were some people who wanted to give money away. That's fine. And I don't think that there's a right or a wrong answer here, for the record. But I have always lived with the mindset of, if you feel called, you should do something. If you feel called, you should give. And what that person does with that money that you give them, it's not up to me. I am not going to be judged for it in the afterlife, whatever you believe, like by whomever. Maybe I'm enabling a drug habit or an alcohol problem. I don't know. But I can't be held responsible for what they choose to do with that money that I give them. But I do believe that I am eventually going to be judged on the character of my heart, right? So I feel like it kind of is the same thing here. If you feel called to go speak up or speak out about something, you should. Educate yourself first and foremost. And then if you feel called to go do something, go do something. I think that for me at least kind of makes sense as that tipping point of, okay, I'm mad enough about this, or I'm frustrated enough about this. I'm going to go write letters to my congressman. I'm going to go to that rally this weekend and go do this. I'm going to put this video out on TikTok that states my stance on it, and open up that conversation and that door for further conversation with people from all different walks of life. So maybe that is it. If you feel called, do.
Going to be a little Debbie Downer here, because I absolutely hate that term of being called to do something, because it is so subjective of what you do. Okay, I'm going to do this. Someone recently felt called to attack Minnesota legislators. He felt called for this.
Yeah.
So I think I want a little bit more than I felt called to this. And maybe that's just simply that if that call calls you to violence, then it's the wrong call. But I just have such a hard time with that
I still think
verbiage.
it's more nuanced than that, though, because here's the thing. I think there are people who are called to violence, and that calling may be the right thing to do. Think about the woman that we reviewed on the video at the gas station several months ago that was getting robbed, and she decided that she was going to stop it. She felt called that she needed to take care of this situation, and she beat the brakes off of that guy. And I think that was the right thing to do in that situation.
Yes, I think so too.
So maybe it's not so much that we need to heed the calling, which I still think is the case. But going back to a comment that we've had on several occasions, maybe we need to start addressing the problem and the cause rather than treating the symptom again here. So we can talk about girl code or bro code or all of these things, but maybe we need to start addressing what human code actually is. Hey, violence is a last resort. Is the very last resort. It hurts. It's painful. You don't ever get to let that off of your conscience and your guilt level, whatever that may be, whether you feel guilty about that or not, but you have to live with that and everybody else has to live with that. So I just am wondering if we need to do a better job again, as a society, of addressing the human code. This is what it is. This is the standard of living across the board as humans. And then once we have that a little bit better defined and applied to life, then those callings make more sense. Hey, these are the guidelines in which we operate. This is, okay, hold on, you're stepping out here, you're too far. You need to come back. That's inappropriate. That doesn't work for everybody. You're out of line. And so maybe we need to address human code rather than...
Yeah, but I think it needs to be even more nuanced than that, really, because here's the thing. You don't get to dictate how everyone else should feel about something.
I agree.
And so the whole participation thing means that it is a group effort. So it's not about what I want or what you want. It's about how we all together decide the best way forward is. And that may not be the thing that I think is right, but at least I came and made my voice heard and said, hey, these are the things that I'm thinking about. These are the effects that I see it could have. We need to think about those in our process of deciding.
You know, the thing is, our assumption here for courageous participation is that people are going to step up for the things that we believe in. And it's just not that simple. I mean, if you talk about a human, code, well, if you look at Vladimir Putin, he believes that Ukraine should be part of Russia. So I don't think he thinks that he's wrong.
And that's kind of the whole point.
So if he's right and he convinces the rest of Russia, I think this is a great example. He convinces the rest of Russia, back me in this. This war is legitimate. This should be part of us. They do this. They were there before. We need them now. And those people step up to that. That works until you look at it from the Ukrainian point of view. And the Ukrainian point of view feels like they're independent and they're democratic and they don't want Russia there. And Zelensky has done an excellent job of pulling the Ukrainians together and continuing to fight. Whoever believed this war would go this long, as far as it has. But they both believe that they're right. And to me, maybe the courageous participation comes back where I, as an American, have to step up and say, wait a minute, I'm going to choose this side. And I'm going to fight for this side because I believe that this is right. Because there's always going to be an opposing view. If you look at gay rights, you have gay people on one side who just want to live their life, love the people that they love. But then you've got a side over here that says, oh, that's an abomination. You can't do that.
But what's the downside of them doing that? What's the downside of gay marriage? It doesn't impact you. Why is it? I mean, you can think it's an abomination all day long, but it doesn't have any actual credible impact to your life. You don't think gay marriage?
That there are people who believe
someone of the same sex.
They're allowing that lifestyle will lead to the downfall of our society. So, I mean, you can call them patriots if you want to, because they believe in this. So it's not a matter that it doesn't affect their individual life if somebody else does this on the other side. It may be a bigger picture to them that they see, oh, this can lead to our downfall. I mean, God will no longer look at us and bless us and value us.
In what way does that make sense, though?
Right,
I'm
but
going
we're
to
getting
judge
off the
you
point.
based on the sins of other people.
We're getting off topic here. I understand where you're coming from, and I would be inclined to agree with you. But those people who feel differently have the right to feel differently and the right to participate, to make their voices heard, and that's kind of the whole point. Again, it's not about getting your way. It's about making sure that your opinion is at least heard. And so if you come in and you say, hey, I think that this is what's going to happen, but you're outnumbered 10-1, tough.
It's not going to happen.
Like, sorry, but it's just, and if you want to continue to oppose it, I get it. But that doesn't mean that you have to go and start killing gay people.
Right.
And the vast majority of people aren't doing that.
Yeah. You know, I was sitting in Chile across the world and was sitting there having dinner one day. And the table next to us, it was me and Ryan, and the table next to us was an older couple, let's call them 65. And they were in town in Chile from Moscow. And this is 3 years ago now. So the war with Ukraine has just recently broken out, and everything is shutting down in terms of people in Russia have to stay there and can't leave and they had to get back. They had a specific time they had to get back. And I remember talking to them. There was a humongous language barrier, and they did a fantastic job of speaking English so that we could understand, because I don't know any Russian. And so I'm super grateful for that. But I just remember her sitting there. She reached over and grabbed my hand. And she said, "This is not our war. This is not what we want. Please don't judge us on this. This is not our war." And I, again, 3 years later, I'm obviously incredibly moved by that. And so you're right. Vladimir Putin probably doesn't think he's wrong. But I'm going to go back to the factions that our founding fathers are writing about, that James Madison is writing about. We need that friction. We need those small groups, and we need those minorities, because we have to control the majority. We have to be reasonable with the majority. And if the majority of people, the majority of whatever group thinks that this is right, the rest of you got to get on board. And I think that you can sit here and look at Russia and use that as a perfect example. The majority of people don't think that that's right. The majority of people don't want to go and just take Ukraine, even if Ukraine doesn't want that. And so I think that we have to, again, look at those small factions and hold them up, hold those minorities and majorities to account, because that is when things change. That is when real change really happens, right? When the majority of people agree that this is the case, now we're going to make it the case. And so I think that courageous participation is your opportunity to join whatever faction you believe in. But like Cole said earlier, it's not about getting your way. It's about becoming part of the majority, or recognizing what the majority really truly wants. And you aren't always going to get your way. But if the majority of people believe that gay people should have the right to go get married, then we're going to give them the right to go get married, whether it impacts you or not. And that's not to sit here and say, you have to feel this way and you have to change your opinion because we've legalized it now and that's not it at all. You can absolutely still keep your opinion, and you can think it's an abomination, but the majority of people don't. The majority of people in this country that you're living in don't. And I'm not pointing fingers at you, Mom, saying you think that this is an abomination. That's not at all. Please don't take it that way. But I think that we, again, have to take all of those individual factions into account in this and say, hey, in this realm of whatever it is that we're doing or talking about or is important, the majority feels this way. we have to heed that. And I think it goes back to episode 16, I think is what it was, when we were talking about that, that Jennifer Lawrence video about whether 100% of people feel one way or 0% of people, there's still only a 13% chance that legislation is going to follow. We're not following the majority anymore. And I think
totally agree.
I think that is where the courageous participation takes root.
Yeah.
And that's
and
why
think
I go back to the calling part of it.
Sure. And I think you're on to something there, because if we go back to a few episodes ago when we're talking about the Federalist 51, well, in Federalist 51, he explicitly talks about, okay, we have all of these checks in place to prevent the majority from overwhelming the minority.
Right.
And they're in place because it would take such a massive, there has to be an overwhelming majority for these changes to be made.
Right.
And so, yeah, if you're 1, 2, or 3% of an opinion, you're still entitled to feel that way.
Yeah.
But tough. Like, sorry. The other 95% doesn't feel that way. Sorry. Should you still speak up and have your opinion heard? Absolutely.
Yes.
And could you eventually make a good enough point that you start to sway some of that 95%? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand that, hey, I'm the outlier here. I'm probably not going to get my way on this. And you could even be right.
Well, and I think that's where I go back to the courageous participation being the calling part of it. If you as the minority decide that Melissa Hortman is doing a bad job, so you're going to go into her life, that is not courageous participation. You are not voicing your opinion. You are not trying to educate anybody. You are not trying to have your voice heard. You are just acting.
You're dictating your opinion onto everyone else.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that one of the problems why we're at where we are right now as a society is that not enough people are participating.
I agree. Well, and then, we started this conversation a few minutes ago, and I keep sitting here just in my brain going, this is our conversation about voting all over again. You want to have an opinion, go vote, go do this, go vote. Interact with your congresspeople, interact with your senators, interact with your local school board, whatever it may be. You want your voice to be heard, go vote. Whatever level that is, go vote. And I think that we have become a society where our votes feel like they don't matter. And it has created and proliferated that apathy, that willingness to do nothing because nothing is going to make a difference. And so it's talked us out in a lot of ways. It has talked us out of courageous participation.
Yeah. And I need to make a point here, because going back to that Jennifer Lawrence video, voting isn't enough.
Yeah.
Just casting your vote, because if you're casting your vote, just, I'm going to vote red, I'm going to vote blue. I don't know what any of these people's platforms are. I know what the general red platform is and the general blue platform is. And I like the blue people more than I like the red people. Well, you're not making an informed decision. You're not actually participating.
No.
You're just casting a vote. And so it really illustrates very well, enough people aren't participating because our representation is not representing us. If more people were paying attention and actively participating, then those people wouldn't still be in office.
It would look different.
So let's talk about a couple of movements that we've seen in the last several years that had nothing to do with voting, really.
Yes.
So if we go to the Me Too movement, that was generated off of Ashley Judd speaking up.
Yeah, she was one of the first actresses to come out against Harvey Weinstein and the sexual assault that he was perpetuating against women, various women. And again, going back to those little factions, talking about, okay, number one, sexual harassment, sexual assault is taboo in our culture. We can't talk about it. It's all so shameful. It's not a thing. So once you had people like Ashley Judd speaking out, or at the 2018 Golden Globes, you had people like Reese Witherspoon and Viola Davis and Natalie Portman and Laura Dern all speaking out from the podium of receiving awards, talking about the need for accountability, talking about refusing to be silent and rejecting this kind of abuse and this kind of harassment. all of those little factions that thought they were small minorities started building their majority.
Coalesced into bigger.
Yeah, building their coalition. And so once they all started talking about it, because we stopped making it taboo, they realized that they weren't alone. And the collective volume gave them a much bigger presence and a much bigger voice to say, hey guys, this A is happening and B is wrong. We need to do something about it. And so I think that there's so much to be said about that collective volume, that people are coming together and able to amplify their voices louder. One voice versus 100 voices, the volume is different. I think about it like a football stadium. I can go into a stadium and scream as loud as I possibly can, and it will never, ever be as loud as the full stadium screaming, you know? And so I just think that I'm certainly thankful that we had a bunch of people who were willing to stand up and say, hey, we're refusing to ignore this anymore. We're refusing to brush this under the rug.
To be quiet.
To be quiet.
Also, and I did a little bit of research last night on the Parkland shooting and the teenagers who said never again, and how that came about. And really within 3 days of that shooting, those teenagers came together and said, we have to do something. People are not listening. We have to do something. And they began to
mobilize,
make plans, until at one point there were like nearly 1,000 subsidiaries, sister organizations that were, again, coalesced together. And they did force some change in Florida gun laws. I mean, people had to listen to them because their voice was so strong and because of who it was coming from. These were the people who were affected.
Yeah.
These were the people who were traumatized. And so, and they faced some fallout. I was shocked to hear that there were some senators who, really badmouthed them, why they were doing it, and that they had no business doing that, and that they should learn CPR instead of, speaking up. And you're just like, how do you even do that? But that movement caused change. And it was from 3 teenagers who started that because they felt so strongly and so
tired of losing friends.
Yes.
Tired of being scared in their own schools.
I mean, there was literally a response from a government official who said, shootings aren't that bad. They're not that prolific. Well, that doesn't make any difference if you're the kid in the classroom with a shooting going on.
Yeah.
It doesn't help if there's 1 or if there's 20. Now, I happen not to believe that. I think that the numbers are a lot more, that they tell a different story than that. But how do you tell a kid that? Well, it's not that important.
You're not that important. Your safety and your life aren't that important.
Yeah. So there are a couple of points that I want to bring up here, because I'm not a fan of school shootings. I think it's awful. I think it is absolutely horrific that this is happening. I also personally don't think that it's the guns that are causing the issue, because we've had guns for a really long time and this wasn't a problem previously. So I think I understand the fear of the students. I understand that this is a situation that we as a society cannot allow to continue happening, to get progressively worse. And I absolutely 100% support their right to stand up for what they believe in and to try and make positive change, even if I don't agree with the change that they're trying to implement. I also think that it is possible before I get to that point, I want to take another step back and talk about the representatives who were bad-mouthing these kids. And likely they were bad-mouthing these kids because they were probably supported by specific corporations or organizations who fund a lot of their campaigns. And so they felt that they had to, in order to keep that funding, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you are being represented by people who are not showing at least a modicum of compassion, then those people, you should stop voting for them, period. Now, if they can come in and they can say, hey, I understand why you feel this way. I understand that you want change. I agree with you. I don't think you're going about it the right way. Let's work together to find a better solution. You should be voting for those representatives.
Yes.
I agree.
But that's not what happened there. So I think you need to be very, very mindful of the people that you are voting for and make sure that you say, hey, these are people that I believe have a certain level of compassion for these issues and are going to try and approach them with empathy and with intelligence and integrity to try and find a better solution than the one that I don't agree with. I also want to, moving away from that specific scenario, I think we really need to talk about how it is possible for courageous participation to go too far. So I'm going to use January 6th as an example here. There was a large group of people who felt that they weren't being represented, and they showed up to try and protest that. And I think originally the intent was to do so peacefully. And I don't think it ended up that way. And I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theory side of it about being provoked or them being let in or whatever it is. Regardless, if you are going to go and try and make your voice heard, you have to do it with compassion. You have to do it with empathy. You have to do it with intelligence and say, hey, I feel as if I am not being represented. I would like to be represented. And if you get a large enough group, but you have to abstain from violence in these situations, because if you are getting your way through violence, you are not doing it as a part of society. You're trying to build your own society and force other people to succumb to your will. And I don't think that that is right. And so I think people need to be very, very careful about the groups that they associate themselves with and the coalitions that they form, and to monitor those coalitions and groups to make sure that, hey, our intent is to do this peacefully, to demand this specific type of representation or this specific type of change, and to be open-minded when doing so to groups of opposition to say, hey, how do we do this together? How do we come to a better solution together to find the right way forward? Because I can speak for myself. I know I'm not always right, as much as I hate that. I hate being wrong, but I know that sometimes I am. And so I need to come to those conversations, to those issues and say, this is how I feel about it, and here's why. Please explain to me why you feel differently. And let's do this calmly and articulately and with compassion so that we can work forward in a productive manner, not to impose our will on the people that we don't like or the people that we disagree with, because that is what our society is about.
Yeah. It makes me think of a Martin Luther King Jr. quote where he said, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, beginning the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it.
And I'm sitting here thinking, if on January 6th there had been voices there who could have spoken up loud enough to prevent that from going violent, what would have happened then? What would have been different than if it had not digressed into violence?
I think that this is a kind of a crazy take on this, but I think that it would have manifested and shown them that they are but a small faction, which is fine. You can have this view, you can take that stance, but you are not the majority. Therefore, we are not answering to this.
Yeah.
And I don't think that, I suspect that they didn't like that answer, and so things escalated.
I think people need to understand that if you don't like the answer, sometimes tough.
Suck it up.
That's
Go
way
ask a better
easier said
question.
than done. Yeah.
Yeah. Ask a better question is a great response to that.
This also makes me, I've thought about it on several occasions, and I have not brought it up during our conversation thus far because I knew it was on the horizon when we're sitting here talking about abdicating your power and what it means to stay silent. And when you remain silent, that means that somebody else decides for you. And you could take and apply that to voting. If you're not going to vote, you're not going to do your research, you're not going to have your opinion shared, you're not going to interact with your legislators and all of this community, yes, because it is certainly much more than your legislators, that silence, that apathy doesn't make your voice louder, right? It just says somebody else can choose. And you have no control over that.
And if
You
you're
have
okay with that,
no,
fine.
if
But
you're
if you
okay
don't
with
like the
that,
result, tough.
yeah, this is what you chose. By doing nothing, this is what you chose. And so, like I said, on several occasions as we've been talking, I am certainly, the alarm is blaring in my brain. The Martin Niemöller poem. Niemöller? I can never figure out how to say it. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak up because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And we're sitting here talking about courageous participation, and I don't think that silence is ever going to be productive for anything that you're trying to accomplish.
Well, it may not produce conversation, but that's the problem. It doesn't produce the conversation that
Right.
needs to be had.
No
Yeah.
one knows where you stand, what you want, how you feel, what you believe, what your convictions are, because you're not talking about it.
And you may think people do, but I guarantee you they don't.
No.
Not unless you're willing to say it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think for me, the way that I'm thinking about this is there is not a more American thing you can do than stand up for someone else's right to disagree with you and to
yes.
speak openly about their disagreement with you. I can't remember the name of the organization, but it is essentially a organization of attorneys who at the time were primarily Jewish, who I want to say it was in like the early to mid 70s, went and represented a group of neo-Nazis supporting their right to have a parade, because they have the right to say those things within reason, obviously, to go and have a peaceful protest, to have a peaceful, what's the word I'm looking for here? I mean, they were trying to have a parade in a town, I want to say in Missouri. And these,
I think it's the ACLU.
yes, the ACLU is what I was looking for there.
And
Thank you.
It was Illinois.
Okay.
And it was the late 70s.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, for me to say, hey, you have the right to have this opinion and I will fight for your right to have that opinion, even though I disagree with you, is about the most American thing you can do.
Yeah.
And we are not doing that as a society right now. We're saying you can't say that because your opinion is different than me. And that's wrong. It's un-American. It's totalitarian.
Yeah.
And it's wrong.
Because they believed that the precedent of silencing speech, even hateful speech, would threaten everyone else's rights in the long term.
Yes.
We should know their names. They should be
American heroes.
They really should be.
I mean, the debt of gratitude that we owe to people who are willing to stand up for our rights is immense. Even your right to stay silent and do nothing. That was fought for by somebody else.
Yes.
Then I think the next point that we need to kind of cover, in order to have courage, in order to be courageously participating, whatever that looks like for you, whatever that conviction is that has you called, sorry, Mom, we need to remember that courage doesn't require perfection. Being outspoken doesn't mean that you are always right or always perfect or any of that.
That your solution is the best one.
That your solution is the best one. And so we pulled a historical reference here from John Lewis and the Freedom Riders in 1961 who were fighting for civil rights. John Lewis, remember, arrested more than 40 times and famously said, "Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble." And this is not me saying, hey, everybody go get arrested. But I do
Please don't do that.
Please don't do that. But I do think that, especially sitting here and talking about the ACLU and things like that, stand up for what you believe. You do not have to be perfect, but you do have to be open to something else. You do have to be open to other perspectives and other takes on whatever it is that you feel so strongly about. And let those, instead of letting those get you down or diminish your train of thought, let them make your argument stronger. Let them educate you further. Let freedom ring. You know, we started this podcast. This will be episode 38 when you guys are hearing this. And we started this podcast because we were having these kinds of conversations. Like Mom talked about earlier, this podcast and the research that it involves and has entailed has certainly put us to task. And we have had to really dig in. And I don't know about you guys. I suspect you can say something similar, but I can absolutely, undoubtedly say that having these conversations between the three of us has made my convictions stronger. Not, oh, well, because I have to fight Cole and he feels differently. Not like that. But I am educating myself on topics that I thought I knew something about, and I was wrong. You know, we talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect the other day. I am out of the valley of despair and working on my slope of enlightenment, building myself back up because we're having these hard conversations, because we're being vulnerable, because we're being open, because we're sitting here disagreeing. This is the epitome of respectful disagreement in many, many ways. I don't know what you're saying. I don't know where you're coming from, but I am certainly open to hearing you out. And I just think that there's so much that I have learned that I value from these conversations that I wouldn't trade for the world.
We've had some hard ones. We've had to step away a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I think when we've had to do that, each of us in some way has gone and done a little bit more research, a little bit more trying to find a way to understand the other person a little bit better. But I mean, sometimes we've had to step away from this. This has not been easy. So not all the time. Sometimes sometimes we're dang funny. Sometimes it just hasn't been all that much fun.
Well, and I think that friction has only made us stronger. I think that
so.
And I don't think that it has necessarily made us agree more or agree with things that we didn't before. But I think that it has really made us stronger because of that kind of forced introspection and that forced education.
Yeah, I think it has created an opportunity for when we're having those hard moments to at least be able to not necessarily just, oh, they're wrong, here's this. It's very difficult in the moment, but to sometimes come back and think, okay, here's how I'm thinking about it and why I am being as stubborn as I am about this. Let me analyze my opinions here and see, do I have weaknesses in these? Are some of these poorly informed, or do I need better education here? And I don't think it has made any of us less stubborn, but I do think it has opened up an opportunity for each of us to, like you said, be more introspective about the topics we're conversing about and say, okay, I feel really strongly about this, but now I need to analyze the weaknesses and why I feel so strongly about this, where those arguments fall short.
Yes.
Well, and I have to say, we've influenced some other people, and that's been really nice to see and know that we've, just because of our conversations, other people have stopped to ask questions, stopped to think about this. And so I think that's one of our goals, benefits, is that we've affected other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't define which way they've gone or which way, if they've agreed with us or disagreed with us, but we have affected other people. And I think that's part of the courageous participation.
I mean, I go back to ask better questions. If you don't like what somebody's saying, ask better questions. And I think that is the impact that it has had. It has required people around us and people listening to ask better questions or ask more questions that they wouldn't normally.
Yeah, I think one of the most rewarding sentences I can hear is, I never really thought about it that way.
Yes. Followed second by, Cole has a sexy voice.
That's true. Desmond Tutu has a quote that he says, if you want peace, don't talk to your friends. You talk to your enemies. That makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, you're not going to reflect positive change by existing in an echo chamber, by
Right.
talking to the
No.
people who already feel the same as you.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and I think social media is
Exacerbated that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's exactly the word that I was looking for. I think social media has exacerbated that and has continued to kind of make those echo chambers really accessible. And I think that
To force those echo chambers onto you.
also true. But I do believe that we can't just cancel everybody that we don't like. You disagree with me. You don't believe the way that I believe. Out of my life, out of my world, because true change never comes from that. It requires more than condemnation. It requires building those bridges, saying, hey, I never thought about it like that. Thanks for sharing this with me. Doesn't
Attack
change
the
where I
idea,
stand.
not the person.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mom's talking about the people that this podcast and these conversations have affected. It is because we're talking about it, because they're asking better questions, more questions, because they didn't just cancel us and say, oh, those idiots, they're talking again. Block, mute, ignore. Hold on. I never thought about it like that. That's interesting. Cole, I think you're right. What a rewarding compliment.
There's one here that I want to touch on a little bit, because this is one that I have been very outspoken about personally and within my friend groups in many instances, about being unsure if your voice would matter. Because I have some friends, if you don't know, if you haven't heard us in other episodes, I am vehemently opposed to our current two-party situation or two-party system, because I think it's anti-American and I think it's inefficient and it doesn't work very well. Not necessarily saying that a 10-party system would be more efficient, but I think it would more accurately represent the people that exist within our society. And James Madison in particular warned against factions, especially having a small number of factions, and that really, he stated in Federalist 51 that the number of factions should be as innumerable as the people within those factions. And so I've had some friends who are very anti-Republican or very anti-Democrat, and in the last several years I feel like it has been more about voting against the party you don't like than it has been voting for the party that you do like. And I personally will not go and vote just because they are red or just because they are blue. I want to know as much as I can about that person, the stances that they have had on topics in the past, the good and bad things that they have done, the changes that they have implemented, to see, okay, do I want to support this person? Do I want to continue to support this person? And oftentimes that leads me to vote third party. And I've had some friends who have chastised me for this. Oh, you're just throwing your vote away. Well, no, I'm not. Because if you had gone and done the same thing, then maybe you would have voted third party too.
Amen.
And so if we want to implement change, we have to make informed decisions. It can't just be, I want my team to win, because the thing you need to realize is that you're on your own team. And even if they're wearing the same color tie as you, they may not represent the same ideals.
Well, and I'm going to throw it back to what we were talking about with the Me Too movement. We can't talk about this. This is taboo. This is too scary. We don't talk about this. I think the same kind of logic can be applied to a third party vote. Well, that doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. It's completely useless. You're throwing your vote away.
Until it does.
Until it does. And until you guys independently start speaking up and saying, hey, I don't accept this. I am going to vote for this third party. I'm going to vote for this independent character. And then again, you're making yourselves known and you're building what you thought was the one person in the stadium to now you have a full stadium of people who felt the same way. And the whole thing about silence and about courageous participation, you have to speak. Your silence is someone else's opportunity. But as soon as you, even if you think that you're just one voice, as soon as you say it out there, you're giving the whole entire rest of the world the opportunity to say, oh, wait, I feel that way too. Wait, I agree too. And You can only fill a stadium one person at a time.
It's true.
Let's jump into our weird thoughts. So, Cole, you brought up January 6th earlier that I think is so interesting, the intention versus the impact and all of that. But let's talk about, when does courageous participation devolve into chaos and truly become unproductive? We've filled the stadium. Everybody is yelling for this same thing. Now we've gone too far and we're not being productive.
When it turns into grab your torch and pitchfork, you've gone too far.
Always? Every time?
Maybe not every time, but generally, if it is, hey, we don't like liberals, so we better go kill them all, that's not productive. If it turns into, hey, this group of people is infringing upon everyone's rights and we have to stop this, at that point, I think eventually it becomes reasonable to defend yourself. But I don't think that you should be doing it offensively. I think you should, again, be attacking the ideas and not the people until you yourself come under attack.
You can sit here and call me a liberal all day long. Okay, fine. Do I believe and agree with some liberal ideals? Yes, absolutely. Do I also believe in some conservative ideals? Yes, absolutely. But I kind of look at this the same way that I look at the use of a gun. Your main job in using a gun, like the first thing that they teach you in gun ownership classes, your job is not to murder someone. Your job is to stop the threat. If someone dies in that process, that's one thing. But your goal is to use this force only to stop the threat. And I think that also, like, that can also be applied here. Your job is to stop the threat. If the threat is, hey, gay rights are just so horrible and I'm afraid that they're going to turn it on me and say, hey, you can only go marry someone of the same gender, that's the only thing that's allowed, your goal is to stop the threat. Killing other gay people, also true. But killing other gay people doesn't stop the threat. You know what I mean? And so I think that we just have to be really, really careful with our actions. Your goal is to stop the threat, not to kill anything. And like Cole said, attack the idea, not the person.
If it's not coming from a place of compassion, I think you're probably wrong.
I think we need more compassion.
What an interesting thought.
Yeah.
If it's not coming from a place of compassion, how many things would that have changed historically?
Yeah, I mean,
George Floyd,
Vladimir Putin,
civil rights,
women's right to vote.
Women's right to vote.
It's not coming from compassion.
Okay, boo. How about a good story? Good news story.
Okay, we do have an interesting good news story this week. There's a new product that's in development called Pyri, P-Y-R-I. It comes from the term pyrescence, which is essentially the adaptation of certain plants to release their seeds after a fire or extreme heat. So most of your like coniferous forests or coniferous trees that produce pine cones would have developed some form of pyrescence, meaning that those pine cones open up and release their seeds after a forest fire. They need those forest fires to exist and reproduce effectively. So this new product is being designed to kind of be utilized as a more cost-efficient early warning system for wildfires. And basically what it is it is for design engineering students from a university in London who have developed Pyri, which kind of looks like a pine cone. It's made out of wax and charcoal composites. And essentially what it does is you would disperse these through areas that are prone to wildfires. And they are very well camouflaged because they kind of just look like a pine cone. They are biodegradable and non-toxic. They're using organic electronics. But essentially what would happen is in the presence of a fire, extreme heat, these pine cones would melt. And then there's a transmitter that once released would release a low frequency kind of tone that would then communicate with a system and alert, hey, there's potentially a fire in this area. And then they're teaming up with different AI tools and software systems to interpret kind of weather patterns in that area. Hey, does this have a high likelihood of being a fire? Is it really a fire? What kind of fire is it? How big is it? What direction could it be traveling? All of this kind of stuff to try and provide an earlier warning specifically to under-resourced, more remote areas where these fires can start before they get out of hand. There was a study done by a university in Australia that said a 1 hour reduction in response times to wildfires could reduce their impact by up to 16%, which a 1 hour reduction in that response time is pretty significant. What if you got a 2 hour? What if you got a 4 hour? What if you got a 10 hour heads up to this wildfire? How much easier it would be to manage that fire. But
I think it's so cool because it's basically biodegradable. It can be distributed throughout. Nobody has to be sitting there watching it. Nobody has to, know where they're at technically, or
they're not harmful even if you did.
They're not harmful to the environment. I mean, it's really cool that there are 4 students that have pulled this together.
Yeah, like you're talking about, as a group, one of their mantras for the product is an old wildlife conservationist mantra of leave no trace. They've actually lost some of their own products within an environment because they're so well camouflaged that they can't find it themselves, which is fantastic. If you need a system like this, what better way to utilize something that is going to impact the environment at as little as possible? And so they have no rare earth metals, they don't use lithium ion batteries, and they look like a pine cone. And so it's really, really interesting. They're hoping to bring it to market in 2027, specifically for a lot of those under-resourced areas that are very remote. And one of the even cooler parts is that they really are trying to bring it to market for a cost that's about 50% of their next competitor. So for those areas, they don't require any maintenance or upkeep. You can basically, they're impact resistant. So they're thinking that they can distribute them over much wider areas by essentially just dropping them out of airplanes and carpeting an area for a significantly reduced cost. Because right now they're relying on satellites, and there are some AI programs. I think Google specifically was one of them that is trying to monitor kind of some of these remote areas. But how expensive is satellite time when you could just have a little piece of wax that looks like a pine cone, and when it melts, it says, hey, there's something going on over here. And so I thought that was a really interesting product coming to market that I think could be really advantageous, because the United Nations Environment Program predicts that by 2050, we'll likely see an increase of 30% in naturally occurring wildfires. And by the end of the century, to a 50% increase. So having that early warning, being able to manage those fires before they get out of hand is really, really important, and could be really, really productive in saving communities, in making sure that the forest, because a lot of those forests actually need these wildfires to exist and to survive and to thrive. But eventually, if those infernos get out of hand, they can be detrimental to those forests. So managing those environments is really, really important. And you can always manage something better when you have better, more accurate information.
I'm just sitting here wondering, I mean, if this works for forest fires, do you think we can develop something for flooding? I mean, after what we've seen in Texas, could something like this be developed and be, the warning sign for flooding? It seems like a not very far stretch over.
I was just sitting here thinking, bless you. I was just sitting here thinking, let's let these couple of students get this launched by 2027 and then put them right back to work on developing something similar for floods.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I think that would be incredible. I love what they're doing. That is so cool.
Yeah. Kudos to them.
Awesome. 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 There is good in the world, guys.
There is good in the world. Yeah. There's some really good things. So make sure you speak up. Be brave. Speak up.
Just
make
know
a difference.
That silence is someone else's opportunity.
Not always golden.
Not always golden.
Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Love you too.